Hello, Alejandra. Hello, Michael. Hello, Fruzbeck. Hello, Ian. How's everyone doing today? Michael, that's a cute little smiley face. I don't even know how you go about making one of those. That doesn't look like symbols on the keyboard. Is that just a comma and a slash? It looks different. Maybe it's Japanese? How did you do that? How did you make that symbol? How did you make the upward smirking smiley face? How did you do that? You did it again. You have to teach me your ways. Copy and paste. I don't know what you copy and pasted though. Maybe you hold the key or copyright to that smile. Whee! Ah, so this is interesting. When you pour a gaiwan like this, with the lid on top and the saucer on the bottom, it's called a hamburger pour because you have like two buns. It's the easiest way to pour that thing. Otherwise, you risk burning yourself. Thank you. My wife just shut the door on me, as she should, because I don't want to interrupt what's going on outside. I should do tea reviews on YouTube. I would love that. Who said that? Barama, arrange that for me, and I'm in. I'm sold. Actually, you can go to there's a my favorite YouTube series. So I watch all these YouTube series on tea, of course. There's this guy called his name is Sohan Fan, and if you look up Tea House Ghost, there's a series called Gung Fu Tea Cha, and it's basically like it's the only thing. It's one of the few things that got me through the pandemic is like watching his tea videos. But I could never do what he does. That's the thing. I'd be super intimidated to try to do anything remarkably close to what he does with tea. So if this interests you, if you're like, oh my god, what's all this tea stuff? I never knew anything about any of this, and I'm kind of oddly interested. Go and look up Sohan Fan, um, and or Tea House Ghost, and you can watch all the Gung Fu Tea Cha videos, and then we'll talk about it. Oh, we will talk about it. That's for sure. Good afternoon, Elizabeth. Hello. Barama's gonna watch the videos. That's exciting. Yeah, they're good. They're really, really good. Um, I'm so distracted. Okay. Can we do a headline of the day? We're gonna do a headline of the day. Then I'm gonna show you um, a speech that one of your classmates, Wendy Chavez, wrote connected to our class's Action Civics project, which is awesome. And we'll connect that to the rubric. And I'm so, so, so excited that next week is um, Project Soapbox NYC. And there's going to be speeches delivered by Firuz Beck and by Grace on different topics as well. And so that's still open to all of you as an extra credit assignment, not to participate in the event next week, but for your speeches to be hosted on their website, which is a wonderful honor and a great way to advocate. So that extra credit assignment is still open to all of you. It's not too late to do that because they're still accepting entries for their website. And then I'm going to give you some project time. So that's our day. And there's an extra credit event. This relates to Generation Citizens event related to all things about the census. So I'm hoping that you get involved in that as well. Lots of wonderful ways to connect what we're doing in class to the outside world. Here's our headline of the day. Don't think I didn't forget about this one, even though it happened a few days ago. Very important to talk about. And most of the things that we've been talking about are domestic policy. So it's nice to finally, I know it's funny, whenever I ask about the news, many students aren't really paying attention, but whenever it comes to war, whenever it comes to conflict, if somebody dies in the world, students know about it. So perhaps this is something that you've come across. Are any of you familiar with this story? Good morning, Lighty. Or afternoon. It's afternoon. I didn't eat lunch yet, so it's hard to decipher morning from afternoon until you've had lunch. Hello, Brianna. Um, just a quick message in the chat box if this is a story that you've encountered. Did you know that one of Iran's top nuclear scientists was assassinated? Well, if you don't know, now you know, Alejandra and Brittany and Lighty. Now you know. So let's talk about it. Let's understand why this is so important and how it connects to US government and politics. So let me read a little bit. It says assassination in Iran could limit Biden's options. Was that the goal? Question mark. The killing of Iran's top nuclear scientist is likely to impede the country's military ambitions. Its real purpose may have been to prevent the president-elect from resuming diplomacy with Tehran. What's meant by diplomacy? That's a term that connects to government, or you might know it in a different context as well. Relations, right? To try to foster cooperation, relations, agreement. Very good, Brahma. That's diplomacy, right? So some administrations or some presidents want to extend their hand in a diplomatic way, right? Let's make a deal. And some presidents are more likely to clench their hand and make a fist. And they're like, you better do what we want, otherwise we'll do things like assassinate your scientists, right? And so that's the opposite approach to diplomacy. There's like the war approach, and then there's the more cooperative diplomatic approach. Both, you're trying to get something that you want, but you use different ways to try to achieve that. Like good cop, bad cop, or good teacher, bad teacher. Like I try to be nice to my students, and I still want the same thing. All teachers want their students to learn and do the right thing, right? And cooperate. Strict teachers want students to do all those things too, but they don't use the diplomatic way. They use maybe they don't hit you, but I don't know, they use their finger and they're strict. I sometimes have a hard time doing that. But I guess like when during remote learning, being strict is, I don't know, it's different, I guess. So those are two approaches to diplomatic relations or to dealing with foreign countries. And so why do you think that a nuclear scientist was the target of this assassination? We think of scientists as, I don't know, good people that you usually don't put hits out on. So what's the deal? Why kill a nuclear scientist? Like you assassinate a general, okay, I get that. But a scientist? Why would another country try to assassinate one of their scientists? The cure for COVID? Something can go wrong with nuclear experiments. So it's definitely the nuclear route, not necessarily the COVID or vaccination route. Maybe he knew too much. Why would that be bad? Too much about what, Alejandra? How could you know too much about nuclear energy? What would be the harm of that? Yeah, but why is this a threat? Why is a nuclear scientist a threat? Maybe he was on the path of creating something to harm another country with nuclear weapons. Exactly, yeah. He could help develop nukes. Exactly. Yes. So here's the thing with nuclear energy. It has peacetime implications and it has wartime implications. So nuclear energy is wonderful as long as you use it safely and you can create power plants which provide people with power and electricity in a very environmentally friendly way, in a very cheap manner. So nuclear power is a wonderful thing, but that same technology could be used to create the most deadly weapon known in human history. And it's very, very difficult to distinguish or to prevent one from the other. Like, if you have the capability of developing nuclear power plants, if you just keep on refining uranium in the same way, you could very much get to the point where you could develop a nuclear weapon. Okay? And so it's hard to say, oh, you can use it for peaceful manners, but without like really verifying it, it's hard to say that you're not going to develop nuclear weapons with that technology as well. This subject is very near and dear to my family because I think I told you before. My wife is from Iran. She was born in Iran, which is where this article is centered. And my father-in-law was actually he wasn't a nuclear scientist, but he was a physical engineer and a civil engineer in Iran, and he built nuclear power plants in Iran before the before the Islamic Revolution. And so, all things in terms of Iran and our country and how they respond to Iran is a big topic of conversation, and very much drives the way that they vote and what they think about like different presidential administrations. And my father-in-law was very supportive of this because he doesn't trust the Iranian government at all, especially as a refugee of their country. And he's glad that uh, Trump and perhaps other presidents like want to use the fist in Iran because he doesn't trust them and he wants to see their government punished. Um, so this is a topic of conversation that is very close to my family, and we get into conversations about this all the time. Also, because who's being blamed for this assassination? So no country has taken like responsibility and they've been like open and said we did it. But basically the world has a very very good idea. And I think it's a very reasonable prediction. And so based upon what you see here in the headlines and what you know about the world, what country do you think is most likely responsible for this? Yes, the fist is very much like big stick diplomacy. So Elizabeth said Israel. What makes you say Israel? We're talking about what country is most likely responsible for the attacks. Why do you say Israel? So it says it right up here, right? Iran accuses Israel of killing the scientist. And in terms of perhaps prior knowledge, if you assess like I didn't even see this up here, BFF. Which countries are our BFFs and which countries are perceived enemies? So Israel's at the top of the list in terms of allies. That's like the perception of Donald Trump's view and all voters as well. And if you look down here in Iran, I guess they don't have Donald Trump over here. I don't know why there's no red dot, but Iran is a very perceived threat or enemy to the United States. Okay, and given the close relationship between the U.S. and Israel, the United States gives lots of military aid and lots of money to Israel, and Israel would really not jeopardize that relationship, and they would never attack a country like Iran, usually without running it by the United States. So most likely the U.S. did not do this themselves. Maybe they helped Israel, but they definitely gave. You can say like without a doubt, like Israel gave the okay to. I mean, the United States gave the okay to Israel to conduct this attack. Okay, and why do you think they did this now? So that goes back to this question, right? And this headline. Why do you think Israel, if you're assuming very likely that they conducted this attack against Iran, why do you think they did this now as opposed to perhaps a few months from now? Yeah, but elaborate on that for Uzbek. It might require a little bit more writing if you don't want to put your mic on. But you speak so eloquently. What does Trump have to do with it in regards to the timing? He's not going to be in office in a few months, and Trump is one of the primary reasons we're allies with Israel. And again, Trump is a man of the fist, not necessarily a man of handshake when it comes to with dealing with other countries. And so, would a Biden administration, right? Would they allow Israel to assassinate an Iranian scientist? Maybe not. And in doing this now, it makes it much more difficult for the next administration to actually negotiate and conduct diplomacy with Iran, right? Even though it wasn't Biden's administration that gave the go ahead for Israel to do this, are you now going to negotiate with the country that has assassinated one of your top scientists? It makes it much more difficult for you to sell that to your own citizens in Iran that we should enter negotiations with the United States again. So perhaps it takes that option off the table, even if the Biden administration wants to take a different approach. Okay, so that it has a lot to do with timing as well. So we looked at this map in terms of BFFs and enemies or perceived enemies. So when it comes to, I'm using the language of like the handshake and the fist, but like the most common language that is used to align to these two uh, values or ways to deal with foreign relations is usually hawks and doves. Doves are a symbol of peace. Hawks are a symbol of war. And I don't know if you've ever seen on any nature videos, if you've ever seen hawks, but they're fighters. They could be quite vicious. And so when you look at this graph over here, what political party or political ideology most aligns to hawks and which political party most aligns to doves? Who are the fighters and who are the peacemakers typically? Democrats are doves and Republicans are typically hawks. Why do you think that is? Maybe someone can make a connection to something what we first talked about way back when I tried to connect political ideology to how your brain works. Because there might be a connection to this as well. You remember? So Ian says fearless leaders, I guess there are fighters and barely peacemakers. Could you think of something that would make someone more likely a fighter and make someone more likely a peacemaker? Like what is it that causes people to react this way? Very good, Alejandra. I think many things have to do with fear. And do you know where fear comes from? We're getting very meta. Do you know where fear comes from? Where does fear come from? Beautiful. You made the connection. The amygdala. Let's twist this up into some science, right? Remember we said that Republicans have bigger amygdalas, which are like your fear centers in your brain. Do you remember what part of the brain Democrats have bigger insulas, right? Do you remember what emotion is regulated by your insula? I mean, I don't know. Unless we physically look at Trump's brain, I mean, I would love a scan of Trump's brain. If we scanned his brain, we could say for certain. But this is just from doing research. Like you had to have people identify if they're, you know, conservatives or liberals. Then you'd scan their brain and you'd see if there's a correlation. So we can't say for everyone or all of them. Do you remember what emotion is uh is identified or connected to the insula? Empathy. And so when you think about wanting to extend your hand and be diplomatic as opposed to fight, you really need to sympathize or connect with like an opposing person and kind of put yourself in their shoes. And that is very much the kind of the emotion or value behind empathy. So there seems to be a connection there as well. So we can't say for certain this is the cause of this. But we know from empirical evidence that there is a difference between the brains of Democrats and Republicans. Not absolute, not everyone, but just like on average. On average, it's more likely if you're a Republican, you have a bigger amygdala. And it's more likely that if you're a Democrat, you have a bigger insula. And it's more likely if you have a bigger amygdala that you are more fearful. Fear plays a larger role. And if it's more likely that if you have a bigger insula that you're more empathetic. So they're not absolutes, but we know on average. And so these are some of the things that we talked about. Just generally, like if again conservatives, they have heightened sensitivity to threatening or disgusting images or something that you perceive as threatening in regards to something that happens in a country or an action from a country. They startle easily or easier than liberals. So maybe it's our brains that govern all of this. We can't say for certain, but it's interesting to think about, right? Any other thoughts or comments on this? Did I blow your mind? There was a pun there on purpose. Okay. So how about we transition a bit and I'll show you another example of student work. Let's see. What did Ian just say? Do you think with the power they have more fear? Like, are presidents in general more fearful than other people? I'm trying to zoom in on your question. I don't know. I would love to see like a psychological analysis of what it's just like to be a leader of a country. I made you laugh, Elizabeth. That's good. I don't know. I'm not really into like presidential biography a lot, but maybe I should be because I think if you read people's biographies, you really get a sense of their mindset and how they approach certain issues. or how they approach dealing with power, which I think is very interesting. Besides economics and history and government, the thing that I'm most interested in is psychology as well. So I often like to try to combine the two, or think about how does one have impact on the other. So I'm glad that many of you are studying psychology, because it's a very important and interesting thing to learn about. So let me show you a speech, which is also a very interesting thing to learn about, especially since it comes from one of your classmates. So I have to switch up a few settings and switch around the way that I'm sharing. So just give me a moment. Okay, I'm sharing our website. So this is our website again. This is our project website on our project to improve students' access to safe drinking water. Here's our common sense proposals. And right above it, we have Wendy's speech. And I'm looking forward to including some of your artifacts as well on our project website, and that will also share in Civics Day. So let me rewind this.
The house where Freddie Gray lived in as a small child sits at the end of a long line of abandoned row houses in one of the country's poorest neighborhoods in Baltimore. According to a testimony filed in a lawsuit in 2009, Freddie Gray's mother recalled, quote, "The water never tasted good. There were a few walls that weren't painted all the way, and on the windows, paint was peeling off," end quote. Perhaps you have heard of Freddie's name before, or perhaps it has slipped your memory as the story is all too familiar these days. The police officer that severed Freddie's spine has been acquitted of all crimes as of April 12, 2020. However, I am not here to talk about the racial injustice or the police misconduct that ended Freddie's life. No, I am here to talk about the injustice he faced in the beginning of his life with lead poisoning. What most people don't know is that before Freddie Gray was murdered by the hands of law enforcement, he was already a victim of lead poisoning. I first learned about the scope of our country's problem with lead when Mr. Edelman, my U.S. government teacher, shared and discussed the results of our school's testing water. At our school, elevated levels were recorded way above the action level set by the EPA. You can see a map of these schools and the full testing results on our class project website. Lead gets into the bodies from paint chips, our drinking water, due to the corrosion of old pipes. Lead damages the brain, central nervous system, kidneys, and blood. And lead is forever. Once lead enters your body, it is stored in your bones and tissues where it slowly poisons you for the rest of your life. Exposure to lead diminishes your ability to learn, increases aggression, and ultimately fosters a system of systemic racism. A child poisoned with lead is 7 times more likely to drop out of school and 6 times more likely to end up in the criminal justice system. When this pandemic ends, lead will sadly still be in our drinking water. The good news is that there's so much we can do. First, cities and states offer residents free testing kits. Order one and test your water. Students and staff at our school have started to do this remote learning. I have done this myself also. Second, buy a point of use filter. It is cheaper, healthier, and more environmentally friendly than drinking bottled water. Third, vote. There are members of our government that are stripping away environmental rules that keep our water, air, and earth clean. Fourth, lobby for change. Our class has developed common sense demands to address this problem, like requiring that all testing data for public drinking water be published and lowering the action level to 5 ppbs for schools. There is no more basic need than access to safe, drinking, clean water. Let's work together to make sure the water we drink both at home and in our public spaces is good for our health.
Didn't she do such a great job? Like, oof, I never get bored of watching that. It was so on point. Okay, let me bring up our rubric. Here we go. So again, we looked at a piece of work yesterday related to a tweet at an elected official, and so you can see that this speech will also connect to our four rubric points very well. So let's do a little assessment of this. So tactic. Did you utilize a tactic that connects to civic action to support our class's project? So she did a speech. That's pretty obvious. Um, and that's a appropriate tactic. But let's also ensure that she used it to as specifically target either an individual or individuals in the sake of activism. So, did you target a purposeful policymaker or rally the public to support our class's project? Well, if she just made this video and shared it with me and did nothing else, right? She just did it as a normal class assignment, then she didn't necessarily target either a politician or to rally support. But since she's submitting this to Project Soapbox and they're going to host it and share it with the world, and people are going to comment on it and be able to react to it or act based upon it, and it's also going to be shared with elected officials as well, then she's most definitely using it to target people in our activism. So she did that too. Problem. Did you effectively communicate the problem that our class's project is focused on? In many ways, right? She connected it to systemic racism, how it connects to our school, how she tested her water as well. So, in many ways, she connected to what the problem was and also the health consequences of consuming water that has lead in it. And then finally, themes. Did you effectively communicate one or more policy recommendations to support our class's project and or what individuals can do uh, to help as well? So she talked about some of our policy goals, and she did also talk about what individuals could do. What were some of the things that she mentioned? I think she mentioned that four steps that individuals can take to ensure their water is safe and lead free. What were some of those things? You can test your water, very good. If there's lead in your water, Lighty, very good. You can filter it. And then what else could you do as an individual to try to invoke change, more broad change? Did you hear what she said for 3 and 4? Vote. Very good, Elizabeth. You can vote for people that will protect our environment and our public health. And then finally, you can engage in activism, which is what we're all doing right now. And so that's a perfect point to transition into your project work time and to answer any questions also that you might have about our projects at this point. So let me know those as they develop and get to work and let me know how I can support you in the project contributions that you're working on.